This is the MeatEater podcast coming at you shirtless, severely bug-bitten, and in my case, underwearless.
We hunt the MeatEater podcast.
You can't predict anything.
The MeatEater podcast is brought to you by First Light. Whether you're checking trail cams, hanging deer stands, or scouting for elk, First Light has performance apparel to support every hunter in every environment. Check it out at firstlight.com. FIRSTLITE.com. Okay, everybody, welcome to our governor's tags Un-American Redux. Is that the right use of Redux? Remember they did Apocalypse Now and they recut it and called it Redux?
I do.
I don't know. It's a redo.
Do-over.
Where we ourselves are in the hot seat. We did an episode, our governor's tags Un-American, and you know, the episode was phrased as though it was a question, but I think there was an overriding sentiment in the room about it's hyperbolic language. Overriding sentiment in the room of, I would say, a tipping that governor's tags. The sentiment in the room is that governor's tags tipped Un-American. We were called out on this by Gray Thornton from the Wild Sheep Foundation, which is the preeminent wild sheep conservation organization in America, and in all fairness, does more than any entity in putting wild sheep back on the mountain, keeping wild sheep on the mountain. So we had to hear him out, and he's here today to tell us where we went wrong, in his opinion. Gray, I want to keep all this fair.
Yeah.
So I want who gets to say, just to bring people up to speed, who gets to describe what a governor's tag is?
I'm happy to give it a shot.
Give it a shot, and then if you do it and I don't like it, I'll give you you a thumbs down.
You know, here's a good thing is, Stephen, this is your show.
Yeah.
So I'm just honored to be here.
No, well, thank you.
I don't know if I called it out. We just wanted to point out some things that we would have liked at least had stated. So
I get criticized about something or another every day. Okay,
you and I both.
Now, most of them I kind of like laugh them off, but your criticism of some of the comments that were made on that episode struck me so much that I emailed you within seconds of reading them. So, like, you know, when you get, if you get called out in a way where you're like, okay, all right, you know, normally I get a mean email every day from my friend Doug, and you know, I'll usually reply by asking if he's seen any turkeys around. How's the turkeys looking? In other news, but yeah. Tell everybody what a governor's tag is.
So,
well, let's talk about what it is before we talk about
what it
ain't.
Well, first of all, where did they come from? And so the first governor's tag was actually given to what was then the Foundation for North American Wild Sheep, now Wild Sheep Foundation, in 1980.
Okay.
By Governor Ed Hirschler from Wyoming.
Okay.
And a lot different than they are today, but the idea from Ed's perspective was, hey, we have these highly coveted tags, opportunities. We've got this fairly new organization, Foundation for North American Wild Sheep, was founded in 1977, so 3 years later. What if we gave one of these tags, they sold it at auction, and we just mandate that they dedicate all the funds to wild sheep conservation in Wyoming? So that's how the whole process started.
Okay.
And so back then, it was a governor's tag. And so
because the state wasn't able to, the state didn't have the mechanism to sell it themselves.
No. So they kind of look at an NGO as, we're the ones that can put on the party, put on the show. And there's a number of us out there that are doing it. Mm-hmm. But it was kind of a changing point for wild sheep conservation funding. Bottom line, FNAWS, or now Wild Sheep Foundation, is in existence because sheep weren't a priority. They didn't pay their way. Too few And unlike elk, unlike mule deer, unlike whitetails, unlike even turkeys, not enough of them to fund their conservation. So for many agencies, they really weren't a priority.
Do you mind explaining what that means by not enough to fund their conservation?
For example, let's look at Montana, and we'll look at 2023 data, 2024 data. 656 tags made available. 558 to residents that brought in, and this is 2023 data, $69,750.
You're talking sheep now, right?
Sheep, bighorn sheep tags.
Okay.
98 non-resident tags brought in a little over $122,000. So $198,000 total for bighorn sheep conservation from the sale of tags.
From the sale of 600 tags.
Yeah, not a lot of money. I started really looking at this 10 years prior, back in 2014, and looked and thought, because I was fortunate to take a bighorn in our unlimited area in 2014. I paid.
Congratulations!
Crazy. I was a non-resident hunter. I paid $750. Coincidentally, that year at our show, the Montana tag sold for $480,000 in 2013. So I was looking at the funding model going, this is kind of interesting. How relevant are these tags to wild sheep conservation? How relevant is Wild Sheep Foundation to the wild sheep economy? Because we're one of the organizations that sells the most. So I did kind of a deep dive, and I had a couple of our biologists look at WAFWA data. And, I think back in 2014, it hasn't changed too much. I think it was about $120,000 came to the state on the non-auction or raffle tag. I thought, well, hell, you can't buy a pickup truck and fund a biologist for that. So how the hell are we going to fund wild sheep conservation? And that's really what Ed Hirschler was looking at back in 1980, is that they don't pay their way. There's so few of them, and the revenue stream is so small from whether they're LEH tags or not.
What's LEH?
Limited entry hunting.
Okay.
What most of us in North America see is, well, we got to apply for a sheep tag. We're blessed in Montana, the only lower 48 state that you can, in effect, buy an over-the-counter sheep tag. Pretty frickin' cool. We got to protect that. Alaska, obviously, you can buy over-counter Dall's tag, although now that's every third year for a non-resident. Canada's where you can, you just buy over the counter for Canadian residents. We obviously have to have an outfitter. So it was a unique funding model, and it's certainly grown. And Wild Sheep Foundation, quite frankly, has been, kind of the premier governor's tag. And now we like to call them conservation permits because that's really what they are, because they're not only governors. British Columbia has a minister's license. Alberta has a minister's license. Tribal tags. We sell tags for the Taos Pueblo, for the Navajo Nation. We've sold them for the Wallapai. We've sold them for the Kawanee First Nation up in in Yukon. So it's, we lump them into a little, I think, more descriptive definition called a conservation permit, which I think really identifies what they are. And Stephen, back in 2014, when I asked our conservation guys to do this deep dive, they used Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agency data, WAFWA data, and found that 73% of all wild sheep agency funding came from either a auction tag, conservation permit, or a raffle tag, with the majority of the money coming in from an auction tag. Fast forward 10 years later, we're still quantifying the data. Right now, it's about 83% in the United States
of sheep
conservation funding at the agency level come from either an auction or raffle tag.
So is it like when one of these tags, conservation permit, governor tag, whatever you want to call them, get sold, is it mandated that that money goes to wild sheep conservation, or is it diluted at all? or-
Brody, that's the $1 million question. The easy answer is yes. Now it's, the proof's in the pudding and in the implementation. One of the misnomers is, we just had our convention in Reno. We sold 30 tags. We're going to direct about $6.8 million to state, provincial, tribal, territorial, and federal agencies through the sale of those 30 tags. By statute, Wild Sheep Foundation has to direct those monies to the agency. What the agencies do for it, a little deeper dive, and I'd like to jump into that. But a misnomer is, oh my God, Wild Sheep Foundation got all this money. No. Arizona, 100% of the proceeds from the sale of any special tag conservation permit that we sell go back to the state, Arizona Game and Fish. Nevada, 100% goes back to Nevada Department of Wildlife. The average that we would retain is about 10%. If you look at all the agencies, if you look at just this last 2 weeks ago at our sheep show, 7.3 some odd million. We're going to keep 600 and some odd thousand. It's 8.9% coming back to the Wild Sheep Foundation from the sale of those tags. Again, some of them are 100% to the agencies. Most of them are on 10. British Columbia is 15% that we can retain. Alaska, interesting enough, has a different kind of a rule, but the monies have to go back to an Alaska NGO. So we sell the conservation permit. 100% goes back to our Alaska chapter. I think they keep 15%, and then they direct the rest to state of Alaska. So I can certainly show you where Wild Sheep Foundation directs our monies. I mean, this year we're budgeting about 2.7, 2.8 in grant and aid going out of a 3.7 million that will fund education, conservation, education, youth education, engaging women, disease research. But so much of what we do is grant and aid out. An agency or a chapter applies for a grant, we give that money away. We keep $600 and some odd $1,000 from these permits. We're giving away 3.7. It's not a money maker for us, but it is a hell of a money maker for the agencies, and that's what we're trying to focus on. And if there's a better way to do it, we're all ears, because our focus is that ram, ewe, or lamb on the ridgeline. And how do we put money into the agency to affect their conservation, their enhancement, their repatriation, their restoration, habitat, and all that? So did I pass? Do we call it a conservation permit?
Yeah, I'm happy with the definition of a
Right on.
conservation permit. One of the things, so this is something I said. If you look at our thing, Corinne,
Which
there's
one?
a quote. They made an extra tag.
Yeah, you were. I think you were trying to figure out if
I
the
think what you
governor's
were
tag
saying
an
is it
extra.
wasn't coming out of the same pool that people draw from.
And
Whose
That's-
side was I on when I said that?
I think it got suggested.
you were on the right side, because that's absolutely
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
You qualified that you were undecided and split
Yeah.
down the middle.
Yeah.
And you
I
weren't
said this is
sure.
one of the
That
few
was-
things. No, I
yes,
remember.
that
I
was
said this is
up
one of the
top.
few things in life I don't have an opinion about.
Exactly.
I'm too torn.
Yep.
I'm too torn.
We can bring in some of Cal's arguments later. I think that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay. So let's dive into one of let's dive into one of these aspects of governor's tags that gets people riled up.
Right.
You can tell us-
Conservation permits, you mean?
Sorry. Conservation permits. I'm going to call them governor's tags.
Okay.
Just because that's I'll try
But
to.
maybe
no, I
we should
can't-
be thoughtful about
We're in-
that.
Because
we're in the
right?
if I
US.
say governor's tags, other guys know what I'm talking about. If I say conservation tag, they're not going to know what I'm talking about. The rebranding isn't
It's kind of
complete
like
yet.
the Gulf of Mexico and the Gulf of America.
But then
It's
it
like-
doesn't.
No, I know.
It doesn't mean that we should stick with.
Stick with governor's tags. But when we go to BC, or I'll
No,
call them
it's
a
inaccurate.
minister's permit. When we're talking tribal, I'll call it a tribal permit.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's an outfitter, there's a guide so I'm talking about Gulf of America.
I kind of felt like you wouldn't let that just go.
There's a so sometimes when we spearfish down in Louisiana, we stay in this place, and next to the place is the Gulf of America charter.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Oh, that's the name of their outfitter.
that was the name of it. That was my first, because this is years ago. That was my first awareness, and I just like chuckled about the Gulf of America.
He was ahead of the game.
Yeah, he's way ahead of it. So it must have been brewing a long time. I got like I'm totally fine. I'm totally fine. Gulf of America. Denali, I feel like that's pretty solidified in Alaskan culture.
Yeah.
Like
I just read an article
even the
about
politicians in Alaska are like, what?
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a problem
Yeah.
with the name. I do remember it being McKinley. Okay, here's one. Here's a governor's tag argument that folks make when they're arguing about this. Oh, you know what was making me, they want to think about this, in all fairness? We have to get into the fact that there is a class. There's a class issue here.
Yeah, without question.
So the other night, Saturday, 2 Saturdays ago, I didn't watch it, but I watched on YouTube. David Chapelle did the opening monologue on Saturday Night Live, and Chapelle was talking about the LA fires, and he was talking about reading commentary and news articles of people saying, I'm glad those rich Californians, their houses are getting burned down. And he said, Chapelle says, that's why I hate poor people. They can't see beyond their own pain. So there is a class issue to this.
Mm-hmm.
Like anything to do with wealth, access, any kind of financial privilege, right, is going to generate animosity, right? You hear someone went to Yale, there's a judgment. Like if that's not part of your family trajectory, there's a judgment. If someone
it doesn't matter in America. It doesn't matter if you're talking about sheep or like real estate or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like
there's like he paid blank million for that house. Boom.
Right.
Like there's a judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so we need to get there. Like I'd like to get there on the issue of just like a perceived sense in America, like I guess globally, historically, a perceived sense that there's like two playing fields, and that people of wealth have access to things that people don't have, and implied in that is some sort of sense that most people that have wealth don't deserve it. So that's just burning, that's simmering underground, and we'll remember to get to it. But let's start with a less philosophical point, because this is just like a factual point. Give me how many tags did Montana issue for bighorns?
One for auction, one for raffle.
No, I'm sorry. How many does the state?
600 in 2023 it was 656 total.
Okay. There is a perception that it would have been, sorry, tell me the number again.
656.
656.
Yeah.
So through the public draw, they issue 656 bighorn tags. There's a perception that the number would have been 657.
Correct.
So that one other, we should use a state that doesn't have nearly as many, because there's so many. And there seems like there's a lot. What's the state that doesn't have shit for bighorn tags?
Nebraska.
Texas.
Well, I don't want to go that extreme.
Texas.
Texas has a bighorn tag.
One or two, maybe.
Yeah.
All right, 600. Okay.
But yeah, no, I see your point.
There's a perception that it should have been 657.
Right.
So some lucky guy, some would-be lucky guy that would have gone down and did the draw, got screwed out of his bighorn tag. Okay. But they auctioned it off to the highest bidder.
Right.
So we've seen a diminishment of the public pool. Now, I want you to tackle whether that's true or not, but then that's going to bring up a broader question. If they create an extra tag to facilitate a conservation tag auction, that makes me feel like the number of tags they're issuing becomes kind of arbitrary. Like, how do you create an extra tag if the number of tags that are being distributed is like a biologically driven reality. Meaning, how did it go from 656 to 657?
So I think an answer that you're going to appreciate. Again, I'll go back to the unlimited area. We've got 3 to 4 to 5, kind of depending on the year, unlimited areas.
Mm-hmm.
Our guru in this state, the biologist Sean Stewart, you listen to him talk about the allocation, the quota for those. It used to be 3 in some, now it's pretty much 2.
Mm-hmm.
We all know there's some years that they take 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6. So you might have a quota of 2, but there's 6 taken legally.
Yeah, can you explain how that happens?
Yeah.
Just for people to.
That's it. Well, so there's a 48-hour window when the season closes. In my particular case, I took a ram. I was the second ram taken in 2014 in the unit I was hunting. Tried to close the season by sending an in-reach in. They don't accept that. So, went through my wife, who then called Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. They go, no, Gray's got to call you.
But you have no cell signal.
I don't have a cell signal. I don't have a sat phone. So I'm using in-reach and long and short, Sean finally went, oh, wait a minute. I know who that guy is. And oh, by the way, he's with Jack Atchison. If there's anyone that knows sheep, it's Jack. And we're going to close the season. But in that case, there was another 24-hour delay and another sheep was taken. So 3 sheep were taken legally in the unit on a quota of 2. There's been times where, 5 people shoot a sheep in one day.
Mm-hmm.
You've got 48 hours to report that to either a conservation officer or a game warden or a biologist. So there's that lag period. You listen to Sean Stewart, and he'll tell you it's biologically insignificant. So that 3rd, 4th, 5th, even 6th sheep is biologically insignificant in the overall scheme of the unlimited units that he's responsible for. So we take that, Stephen, go back to the state of Montana, and you were absolutely correct. It is typically by the legislature, an authorized additional tag to what Game and Fish is going to say, hey, this is what our offtake is going to be. The typical offtake for bighorn sheep males that's considered sustainable is, from an allocation standpoint, is 2 to 3%
Of males?
Super conservative.
Wow, that's low, right?
Super conservative. So that's what the state's going to allocate, or the.
Is it really that low?
Yeah.
'Cause I know
2 to 3%.
I know this is really hard to. People are going to argue about these numbers all the time.
Sure.
But I've heard with deer management, 13%, 20%, not just the males, but the herd.
Right. And now think of recruitment. To increase a herd, you need recruitment of 20, 22, 23%, whether it's bighorn sheep, whether it's elk, whether it's mule deer, whether it's whitetail.
Okay.
Well, now we're harvesting, and if you look at the, again, WAFA data, it's like 1 to 3% is the average male offtake.
No kidding.
So we're already managing to a super conservative harvest.
Yeah.
So Montana does. Then the legislature comes through and says, hey, we're going to raise money for Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Park. We're going to authorize 1 auction tag, 1 raffle tag, and add 2. So if we can go back to Sean Stewart's presentation where he's saying, hey, look, even in the 3 to 4 to 5 unlimited areas, with a quota of 2 per unit, if they go over 1 year by 2 or 3 or 4, biologically insignificant, I'm not concerned about. So to your point, we're already managing super conservatively on bighorn sheep. That those 1 to 2, Wyoming's got 5, Nevada, 5 bighorn sheep permits they authorize on auction. They then have, they have their commissioner tags, but those aren't for bighorn sheep. Those are elk, mule deer, pronghorn, moose, I think. There's a moose tag, not a commissioner. So you were absolutely correct that these are additive. And what's amazing is when you look at, we sold, we're $192,000 in Montana in 2023. We sold the tag. We directed $288,000 on the auction tag to Fish, Wildlife, and Parks.
Mm-hmm.
That adds to their 192. We did a raffle back then too. It was 125. So 125,000 for raffle. We double it, more than double it for the auction tag, and then add that to the resident license. Still not a lot of money. So
hit me with the amount. Hit me with the amount that went in the tag and license fees for the public draw versus like the amount.
$192,000, $250 in 2023 for 656 tags.
And then the auction tag.
Then we add one more auction tag. We added another 288. Added one raffle tag, 125. So I guess but you're so right. I mean, so here's the thing that I guess frustrates us on this side. There's not a financial argument that you can make to say that it's the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it really is a social justice argument, and so. I can show all the statistics that'll say that, look, and, it's additive. It's not, I'm a regular guy. Am I going to be able to buy one of these tags? Nah, not unless I rob a whole hell of a lot of liquor stores or win the lottery.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you what I'm thrilled with, and that is that somebody is willing to do that. And because of that money, it's offering more opportunity for regular guys and regular gals like me. So, that's the crux of the argument. And then when we dive into the social side of it, because and it's sad. I mean, I drive a 2017 Toyota pickup truck. You know what? It works. It's got 156,000 miles on it. I drive by somebody who's got one of those new GMC AT4s. Boy, that looks slick.
You must have been.
Do I have to have that? Am I envious? Well, I don't know. It's like, well, maybe one of these days, but my truck still pulls my trailer. I'm okay. So I look at these guys or gals that are buying these tags, and I'm grateful because it's wildlife philanthropy.
Let me hit you with this though.
Okay.
One's good. Okay, where is 10 good? Like if it's financial, if it's strictly financial, how far would you extend that logic? Like if there's 600 tags, would you start to feel uncomfortable if we auctioned 500 of them?
You know what you're going to have is law of diminishing returns, and we saw that in Alberta, where they thought Alberta was that's where the big sheep were. And so,
like in a very specific place too, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, it was Catamount. It was around the Catamount mine.
Yeah, that's right.
And so they're basically park sheep coming out if they come out, or they can just hang, and you could sit there and there's a specific rock. I think it's called Hot Rock or something like that. That these people would literally beeline from the trailhead, get to Hot Rock, and then just wait and see if these big rams would come out of the park. I think it's Jasper National Park. And sometimes they would, sometimes they wouldn't. But they're big sheep. And, the prior hunted world record was taken there. And so that's where people were chasing that tag, and that's where those dollars went. Well, Alberta at one point thought, maybe we can make even more money. So they started adding more and more auction tags and even some more LEH tags to that same area. And then you had a hunting experience that wasn't exactly the most enjoyable. Everyone's making a beeline for Hot Rock, and then they're all sitting around the rock waiting, for a big sheep to come out of the park. So I'm being a little facetious, but that's basically it. So you can have a law of diminishing returns. Really interesting this year. Arizona last year chose their commission.
That's my next question. You're doing my next question.
Yeah, Arizona
Can I do the question?
Chose. Yeah, please.
Did Arizona get rid of governor's tags?
They did. They did.
Take it away.
They got rid of governor's tags, and they're going to a raffle.
Okay.
So Wild Sheep Foundation was given the last Desert Bighorn sheep tag to sell on auction, unless there's a commission change. And, it's politics at this point. Yep. We were also given a pronghorn antelope tag. Last year we sold the Arizona tag. I think it was for $420, I think I have that data. What did we sell that tag for? $430,000. $430,000. 100% of those dollars go right back to Arizona Game and Fish. This year we sold it for $500,000. Crazy.
Really?
You want to really go nuts? We sold the Arizona pronghorn tag in 2024 for $95,000. A pronghorn tag, the last one going to be on auction, sold for $215,000. 100% of those dollars go right back to Arizona Game and Fish. Now it's going to go to raffles. We all know that you're not going to make the same amount of money. Organizations, NGOs in Arizona balked and didn't even apply for these tags. Wild Sheep Foundation looked at it and said, we could thump our chests and go, aren't we great? We're selling these tags for an unbelievable amount of money. You're not doing what we want, so we're not going to play your game. We didn't. We thought, no, let's have a seat at the table. We'd rather be at the table and talking and doing something good for wildlife. So we applied for their bighorn tag, and we're going to raffle that off. I think it's sold at Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society, who we partner with in Arizona, on the Desert Bighorn tag, on the Arizona pronghorn tag. Arizona Desert Bighorn Sheep Society sold the bighorn tag last year at their banquet in May, $360,000. We'll probably, through a raffle, be able to direct $125,000 to Arizona Game and Fish versus the $350 or $360, and then you compare it to the $500. And then we get into the equity of raffles, and that's a question I'd love to ask is, those that think that raffles are equitable need to look a little deeper dive there. A Washington resident can't purchase an online raffle outside of his or her state.
Because of gambling law?
Gambling law.
Steve, is this a similar thing what we went through and we both we weren't physically in the state of Arizona?
I don't know if that was a gambling law or just a rule.
Right.
I don't know.
No, it's so in Washington, it's their state gaming commission.
They regard that as gambling?
Yeah. Now if you're in state, you can do an in state, but if we're out of state, we can't sell. Arizona got burned on this. Arizona has a super tag.
Yep.
And they've pretty much, they used to sell that.
I buy those.
They did exceptionally well on those. They were selling them out of state. They got a call from the Gaming Commission of Washington State saying, hey, you're selling to Washington residents. Yeah, we sure are. Great opportunity for them. We're raising money for wildlife conservation.
Non-profit.
And they said, you're violating our state gaming laws.
Oh, my God.
You got to refund that money. Corinne and I were talking about the pandemic. Wild Sheep Foundation got kind of clever during the pandemic. We're all fighting to figure out how the hell are we going to raise money. We actually sourced out of Doha a virtual
Doha, Qatar.
Yes, a virtual expo thing. Rather interesting. We had to change all the avatars. There were no blonde people in this expo thing, but that's a whole, and no cowboy hats and no ball caps. So Brody, we could not find a ball cap in this Cutter application. But I digress a little bit. But what was really interesting is, so we said, okay, we're basically selling a ticket to sit in front of your MacBook or your PC and watch our show. Our auctions online, those are easy to do. Expo, a little more difficult. And you know what? To incentivize you to buy this ticket, we'll put you in a drawing for a Desert Bighorn sheep hunt. Fair enough. All you have to do is buy the ticket and you're in the drawing. And somebody is going to win a Desert Bighorn sheep hunt. I get a call from Washington Gaming Commission. And they said, hey, you're conducting a raffle. And I went, man, we're not conducting a raffle. What are you? I finally figured out what I said. Oh, wait a minute. You've got some registration thing. You're giving away a Desert Bighorn sheep hunt. Yeah. They said, well, you can't do that in Washington. You're based in Montana. I said, well, actually, we're kind of clever. We run our programs for our raffles out of Wyoming, but this isn't a raffle, so this is just a registration thing. He said, you're still breaking our gaming laws. There's been a complaint against you.
Oh my God! Really?
We had to
They're-
refund $27,000 in registrations. We had to make it at least fair to our Washington folks that wanted to participate. We just said, hey, we're refunding your money, and if you want to attend our virtual convention, you can do so for free. Well, that happened in
These
Arizona.
are the people that banned fishing during the pandemic.
Yeah, go figure. So the laws are so crazy. Look at Montana's an interesting one. We accept on raffle checks, cash, debit cards, not credit cards. So if you're conducting a raffle in Montana, you got to make sure that your system knows that Visa that somebody just sent you was a debit card, not a credit card. And we've been stung on that one. Arizona got stung. Their super raffle got stung really, really bad by Washington. So now, and Brody, I think you touched on it, now Arizona is only conducting their, I forget what they're calling it now. It's not the super tags, but in-state. So now you have and Steve, you had touched on that. Now you have
me and
maybe
Corinne got boned out of $100 a piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Went towards conservation.
Raffles,
Quit your
I shouldn't
complaining.
say
raffles are not as equitable
Donated.
as they may sound.
Let's back up to Arizona, because really, this decision that came out of Arizona drove this whole conversation.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've definitely over the years have touched on it. I have always been I've always been torn by the issue, recognizing the money, but then also, I recognize the tremendous amount of money that goes to conservation. And I also recognize the kind of populist rage against, who the hell has $400,000 to buy a sheep tag, and why does he get one but I don't? I recognize both sides of this. But what really fueled this renewed conversation was Arizona's decision, the commission decision. And it came to a vote, and they said that going into the future, we're going to step away from doing auction tags.
Right.
What's your understanding of that process? Like what were the inputs they were looking at? Was it primarily social pressure?
I would say it's social pressure is probably the biggest one.
Mm-hmm.
The revenue side was certainly expressed. I was actually asked to do a video for their commission by the chair.
Mm-hmm.
We did a 6-minute version. We did cut it down to a 3-minute version. Talked about how much money is raised for Arizona. What will happen to bighorn sheep? But now you look at that pronghorn, $215,000. What will happen to pronghorn conservation? What's going to happen? Is there anyone in this room that can tell me that there's an agency that has too much money from a wildlife agency standpoint? Maybe a few government agencies we'd like to cut out, but from a wildlife agency in the United States, everyone's clamoring for more dollars. We need more biologists, we need more trucks, we need more uniforms, we need more habitat improvement. All of that. So it wasn't a money thing. There was some pressure from some groups that really do think the raffle is the way to go because of, Stephen, exactly what you said. It's an envy thing. It is a polarization thing, and we see it in all walks of life. Whether it's a guy that's lauding and applauding somebody's home in Pacific Palisades being burned because he or she is pursued to be rich and I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I don't buy into that, but I recognize it. I recognize. There's also, and it's been said, well, this is against the North American wildlife conservation model. Shane Mahoney and I are really, really close friends, and we share a stage around the world on giving speeches and the like. I used to, in my presentations, call this auction tag, governor's tag, special permit, conservation permits. I used to call it a bastardization of the North American egalitarian model. I said, but it raises all this money.
You used to say that.
I used to say it. And I said, it's a bastardization of the model, but it works.
How long ago was that?
Shane and I were in my drift boat on the Yellowstone 8 years ago.
Okay.
He and his wife. He's, said, hey, let me float you down to Yellowstone. You're such a busy guy. Why don't you fly fish a little bit? And, typical Shane, he just kind of puts the rod down. He's looking around. And then in that voice of Moses, Gray, I want to tell you something. You're wrong. I went, all right. Wrong a lot every single day. What am I wrong at this time? He goes, I've heard you on stage call this governor's tag conservation permit model a bastardization of the North American model, and you're wrong. I said, well, you being the foremost spokesperson for the model, tell me why. And he says, one of the pillars of the model is state and agency determination of how is the most efficient way for them to raise money for wildlife. If a state determines that a auction tag or a raffle tag or come up with whatever program it is the most efficient mechanism, well, then that's consistent with a model. We just did a permit discussion at our sheep show in our Full Curl Cinema. Had Shane, my EVP of Conservation, Corey Mason, myself doing a Q&A afterwards. And Shane said it again. He goes, this is consistent with the model. The challenge is the social license. And Steve, it's what you said. And you cannot discount that. I could certainly talk about a way to look at it that maybe will sway some views on it, but there is just a built-in, even though it's additive, even though it's driving 83% of the conservation dollars for wild sheep at the agency level in our country, there's still this, well, so what? I don't care about the money. It's just not fair. Mm-hmm. Somebody is able to buy something that I can't. Well, I guess I look at that, and I mentioned the term wildlife philanthropy. You look at a high net worth individual, and we applaud when there's a name on a hospital wing because they donated a potload of money to that hospital, or they donated to feeding the hungry, or to the welfare of pets, or a football stadium, or an art museum, and we applaud that philanthropy. Well, this, in my opinion, is wildlife philanthropy. Why don't we applaud that?
Because they would get universally applauded if they weren't taking the tag. If some guy got up at your convention in Reno and some guy said, "Hey man, no strings attached. I don't want shit for it. Here's $500,000 for wild sheep in Arizona.
$500,000 for raffle as opposed
that'd be
to
the response. I mean, like if you're actually asking the question, that would be why. And it again, it's like
so the name on the building isn't an accolade too. And I get it.
No, it is. Well, when it's but I don't think like if Verizon underwrites a sports stadium as a marketing play, I don't think that Verizon is applauded.
No, they're recognized.
It's like sort of there's a quid pro quo to it. It's like, yes, they're underwriting the sports stadium, but it's like a marketing expense. So if you could somehow get into a guy's head who's buying a sheep tag for $400,000 and he was gonna go write the check anyway, because he believes that much in wild sheep, but then like as a little added perk, got a tag too, I think that would diminish some of the social condemnation. But I don't think people are looking at it. If talking about people who feel burned by governor's tags, I don't think they're looking at it that it was a donation. I think they're looking at it that it was a purchase.
I think you're looking at the psychology of it.
Yeah,
and they're certainly getting a benefit back.
Yeah,
even if they don't take the sheep, and that certainly happened. I mean, I a good friend of mine from Texas, back in the day in Alberta, I think he bought the tag. He bought it 2 or 3 times and didn't take a sheep once. There was another guy that was always chasing him. He's since passed. And I think he he bought it at least 3 times, didn't take a sheep twice.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
I see your point, and it's
presumably had opportunities to get a sheep.
But you're getting an opportunity. Well, you're getting an opportunity.
That
With
almost
no
one
no
else is-
guarantee, and I look back, I look back on the guy that ended up buying that record Montana tag in 2013 because I felt that my $750 tag back when Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks had $120 in revenue coming in from me, and others, us regular folks, and they got 90% of $480,000, that my ability to hunt sheep in Montana was because some crazy guy was willing to spend that money. He made an interesting comment to me. I thanked him, and he says, "Gray, here's the deal. I give to my church. I give to," he had another kind of pet charity he gives to, and he goes, "and I give to wild sheep conservation." Yes. Now, does he get a spiritual benefit from giving to his church? You bet. Does he, it's a little bit more than my $20 in the tray. Does he get a benefit, satisfaction out of giving to, in this case, they were homeless shelters or something like that? Sure. Does he get a benefit from buying that sheep tag? Yes, he does. But I know I did too. As the regular guy, I benefited because he chose to direct his philanthropy towards conservation, not a football stadium. So that's a good point, though, Steve.
Let's change course a little bit. In conversations with people who are suspicious of, critical of auction tags, a common thing people point out is, and I've pointed it out myself, is that in some cases you get a season that's way longer.
You bet.
Like potentially 365 days long.
Yeah.
You sit outside of the unit thing. So Joe Blow draws a tag and he might have an area 10 by 20 miles, whatever the hell, smaller. That's his hunt unit. The auction tag holder can hunt any unit that's open in the whole damn state, right?
Right.
And so people look and they'll be like, well, why is that? Why this amazing perk to wealth? Like, even once we have the tags, I won mine on the open tag allotment. He bought his, but his is better than mine.
And something to build on what Steve is saying, like I once listened to a conversation at a Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation thing in Colorado where someone had drawn a bighorn ram tag in a unit where there was only one tag. And he spent a bunch of time scouting, and there was a real big one in
I was going to
there.
ask you to tell this story.
Yeah.
He on his way in scouting one day, kind of a posse of dudes are coming down the trail, and he's like, "Hey, they strike up a conversation." He's like, "I drew the tag. I'm looking for this ram," and they were basically like, "Don't bother. Like, we're guiding the governor's tag guy, and they know when the season opens, and they're like, we're going to get that thing before you ever have a chance to get it." It wasn't like an impolite conversation, but
Just
it was
a heads
like,
up.
yeah.
Because he had his team of guides.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
there's
that's-
like a social conflict there too.
You bet. And that in my opinion is the dirty underbelly. And is something that if we are to retain the social license to have these, we need to be able to answer those. And I would say right now we don't.
Well, why can't you answer it this way?
Go ahead.
Let me provide you with a hypothetical answer. Not hypothetical, but I mean, wouldn't it be if we as hunters are agreeing that auctioning off a tag for several $100,000 creates more sheep opportunities for everybody, potentially leads to bigger bighorn populations, so that there's more tags available in the general draw. We got healthier sheep herds. We got healthier sheep hunting. If we can make that tag even more valuable, and it's still only costing us one sheep, why not do everything we can do to make it more valuable?
Well,
like if you said, if you auction a tag off and you got 7 days,
right,
all of a sudden the price is probably going to plummet
without question. And
so I mean, but I feel like I'm not saying that that's ultimately the answer, but that's kind of how I look at it. Would be, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to give away a sheep tag. I don't know, get the most money you can out of the son of a bitch, and if you need to make the season longer and that jacks it up by $100,000, okay.
Well, and you nailed it. And if going back to the prior podcast and the title, our governor's tags on American. Well, no,
that was a good title.
No, these conservation permits and these governor's tags are absolutely American because it's based on supply and demand and an interest in capitalistic process. Now, that was my argument as well. It's against the egalitarian North American model. Shane corrected me. But Stephen, you're absolutely right. But the dirty underbelly is perception.
Yeah.
And if, Arizona is a 365 day, being intellectually honest, we like to give breeding populations time off. Now Montana hunts during the rut for mule deer. We archery hunt in the rut for elk and others. Typically, bighorn sheep are not in the rut. There's some seasons that there could be. Certainly, these conservation permits that either are extended season, earlier season, or any unit opens it up to going right back to that social license question on, well, how come it's that much different? Well, why is it that much different? Because that's what increases the price. Classic example is Alberta.
Okay.
They made, which, some could say were some mistakes, back in the 90s, and they were just offering too many tags. Price started to go down, and they're going, geez, we used to be the big dog. Now Montana is, now New Mexico is, Arizona was. I mean, it's Colorado was last year. I mean, it's kind of amazing when you look at, where the big dollars are coming in on these conservation permits. But 2 years ago,
can I stop you for? Does the amount change based on where the big ram is that year?
Without question.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Without
That's
question.
on my mental list of things to bring up.
Which is a dirty underbelly.
Can I also ask, with the fewer of a lower number of available tags per state, does the number also go up?
Probably. I couldn't. What we're seeing now is,
just kind of like the FOMO
you look at what's been really interesting is, kind of ground zero for disease has been in the tri-state area, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. Our chapters in the region, the agencies in the region, Wild Sheep Foundation has pumped millions of dollars into disease research, into kind of some novel separation policies and some draconian policies like test and remove. You're
talking pneumonia, correct?
Yeah. Mycoplasma pneumonia is a setup agent. It's a pathogen. And what it does is it can lead to ammonia.
Okay.
Pneumonia. Primarily comes from domestic sheep, also domestic goats. It can be within a wild sheep population, so it can be endemic once they get it from a vector, a source, domestic sheep or goat. Well, we've done collectively a pretty damn good job of at one point we eliminated Mycoplasma pneumonia from the Hell's Canyon complex. Better lamb recruitment, big rams, and that's just healthy sheep.
Mm-hmm.
Now Oregon tags selling like crazy. Idaho tags selling like, new state records taken in Oregon, Idaho, Washington. So, there's just this dynamic.
So
But
the buyers are like, this is a point I think that is important to get into, because
they know
it's important to cover, because it's part of what it's part of the social conversation being when an auction tag comes up, oftentimes the buyer is basically buying an opportunity to go get a specific sheep that he has been made aware of by his outfitter.
Yeah.
They're like, look here, we got a 200-inch ram. You'll get to get it before the public. Here's a dossier. Here's all the photos of it. You buy it, you hire us. Our guys will keep an eye on it. We'll put 6-7 guys out and watch it. You show up, boom, it's yours, because we're already on it. And that burns people's ass.
It does. And I would call, in that scenario, that is a dirty underbelly. Now you've got another scenario,
but is that again, is that the tag's fault?
No, it's not. It's our fault. It's the, let's push the envelope on fair chase, which we need to clean up. Now, here's a flip side of that. And I'll tell you a little bit about the guy that bought the $1.3 million New Mexico tag 2 weeks ago.
What?
1.3?
Yep, 1.3. So
a New Mexico sheep tag went for 1.3?
Desert Bighorn, right? Is it
Rocky Mountain?
Rocky Mountain.
Was that a new record?
Absolute new record.
Holy cow. Is he gunning for a specific sheep?
Yeah, he's gunning for, but I'm going to tell you a story about him and what he said.
Oh.
So,
holy smokes.
1.3 million.
Now that's at a point where that's getting
makes your eyes water.
Suspiciously philanthropic.
So, almost, Steve. So there was a period of time where, everyone was chasing very, very large stone sheep.
Uh-huh.
So the BC minister's license, which is kind of a unique license and there is a raffle tag too, but there's a minister's license on auction. There's a minister's license on raffle. The minister's license in BC, you can hunt. They've got 4, subspecies, if you will, but 3 species. They've got Dall sheep, stone sheep, bighorn sheep. But a bighorn sheep, they got California bighorn and Rocky Mountain bighorn.
Oh, I got confused. I'm sorry. Say that.
So there's a subspecies of bighorn sheep called California bighorn.
Yeah, but hold on. Who has all of them?
British Columbia.
They have those?
The only thing they don't have is desert, but they have 4 wild sheep species. Dalls, stones, Dalls, and it's a teeny little area up in the far northwest corner, adjacent to Alaska, lower part of Alaska. So they have Dalls. They are, the location for stone sheep, other than fanning up in the Yukon. They have California bighorn. That's primarily
that's what I was unaware of. Is that like on the west coast or something?
It's in the Fraser River Valley.
Yep, got it.
And then bighorn sheep.
Huh, okay.
Around Fernie and the like.
I had no idea.
So you can buy that tag, and you can choose. You can choose which sheep you want to hunt. So, years past, it used to be they'd chase a bighorn. Now it was, hey, you're gonna be able to hunt early and late for stone sheep, and stone sheep was the hot item. That permit went for $300,000. There was a sheep that, a couple of big ones that people were knew that were around. This guy knew that they were around. They're all killed in an avalanche.
Seriously?
C'est la vie. Oh. So now let's go back to the.
Really?
Let's go back to the. Yeah, it's like a pile of 4 sheep killed in an avalanche. All 4 of the big ones. It's like, hey, that ram you were chasing no longer.
No way.
But congratulations, that's philanthropic. So
Did
now
he petition for a refund? You got to be kidding!
No refund.
Can I?
Yeah.
I got to explain something to folks.
Yeah.
I'm trying to keep this real 101. Just to point out something obvious. the reason 365 days a year is enticing for sheep is because they don't shed their antlers. We should point that out. So, like, if you're hunting elk, let's say you're buying a governor's tag for elk, like that elk's going to get maximum size and get hard antlered in September, late August, early September, and then he's going to drop his antlers down the road in March, right? So, if you had 365 days, and maybe you do, it doesn't really matter. Right. Because you're chasing how many months is that? September, October, November, December, January, February. You got half the year he's going to have.
That and any antlered species could just bust them up.
And he could also snap them.
Yeah.
And a lot of those big bulls, especially in the desert Southwest, do snap them off. Yeah. So like, but a sheep, I mean, by the time he's the kind of sheep we're talking about, this sheep is 9 years old, 10 years old, 11 years old, but he's carrying his rack year round. You shoot him in April, he's got that's right. The same attributes as if you shoot him in November.
They're horns, not antlers. So, they wear their life on their head.
Yeah.
So let's now go to the gentleman that bought, which is now the record for any permit.
Okay.
1.3 million. I was visiting with him last week, thanking him, wow, incredible. How the heck did that happen? I mean, 300,000 is a lot of money. 1.3 is, I like what you said. That's starting to
philanthropic.
kind of pretty close to, you want to wing on that hospital. And he says, I knew it was going to go over $1 million. I wanted to go over $1 million. I'm happy. Season opens August 1st for me. I sure hope a mountain lion doesn't get it, but it is what it is. That's
famous last word.
Philanthropic. Mm-hmm. That is a guy, and he's done very, very well, obviously, in life. And crazy enough, I think there were 3 bidders in at 1.2. So,
and at one point, those guys were like, enough is enough.
Just amazing. I mean, you can imagine the energy in the room when you see that.
Tell me about the sheep.
Yeah, I was like,
what's the sheep they know about?
Why so much of this year and not after that sheep last year?
There's 200 points is kind of the holy grail, and so there is the thought that the largest bighorn in North America is in New Mexico.
Is alive right now.
So there you go.
Yep.
And he's got a price on his head.
And so
let me ask you
is that unseemly? Well, I guess, but Steve, you pointed out that hey, if the goal is to raise the most money for the resource, well, this is how we're going to do it. Now, we just need to make sure that it's ethical, the view. And Brody, I think you touched on it. If there's like 10 guys, out on a mountain and they're camping on the sheep, it doesn't smell right and it doesn't look right.
But it's not illegal.
No, it isn't.
No.
You're never going to get there. You're never going to enforce. You're never going to create a secondary set of laws that someone's going to have to apply to. Now, let me give you, for instance, me and Brody go hunt with our little kids. Okay. Some of them at a certain age, they can shoot before they're like terribly helpful. Right? They don't know. Even when we leave home, a 10-year-old, they're not even really aware of what direction you're headed. Okay? So we're out with our kids. So-and-so sees a buck. He tells another grown-up he sees a buck. We tell the kid, you drag the kid out of their sleeping bag. We got to start walking. They don't really know, right? And eventually, you're like, there he is, get him.
Right.
Okay. So would someone go, that's unethical. That kid, that child
didn't
glass. Yeah. They didn't scout. They didn't glass that buck up. Right?
Right.
So you're never going to get there where you're going to come in and be that operating within the confines of the law, we would expect it to be different. Meaning, if I apply for 25 years and I draw a bighorn tag, and all my buddies at work, and I could see this happening.
Oh, yeah.
All my buddies at work are like, oh, man, what a riot. And 3 of us go up in jet boats, right? And we pour the coals to it, glassing for sheep. And one of my buddies comes into camp. He's like, we found a giant.
You're not going to be like, I want to find it myself.
I'm not going to wind up being like raked over the coals about it. It would
No.
be like, no, they went up. But there's a thing that happens where there's already a financial bitterness, and then on top of that, there's a added bunch of what seems to be like shortcut taking, right? And it tarnishes the thing.
Yeah.
But in people's eyes. But then, in all fairness, like, are you really going to make a separate set of game laws for an auction tag holder that you wouldn't make for a guy that bought an elk hunt from an outfitter?
Well, they do. In some cases, they do make a separate set. With
Yeah,
the-
they make it
they
easier.
extend the seasons
Sure.
and the like. But and that does it gets back to this. What is the public perception?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the real grind? And again, there's organizations that are, well, we just have to go to raffle tags because that's more equitable. Well, so then the person wins the raffle tag. Is there also a team of guides that
Probably
go in?
so.
Yeah.
In some
so
cases,
what's what's the difference there? And there are crazy things that have happened. I've heard of the raffle tag winner's outfitter calling the conservation permit outfitter saying, I'll tell you what, if your guy writes my guy a check for X amount of dollars, we'll let you go after that guy and we'll go after a second.
No.
Now that to me stinks. And that's almost extortion.
Right.
No.
And so, and and this gets back to the social thing too. Any time that a super high price is put on a resource, there's going to be challenges to that. And we know it. So, where the Wild Sheep Foundation looks at this as, okay, we're raising the most money for a resource that's got challenge, whether it's disease in the lower 48, whether it's drought in the Southwest, whether it's super heavy, wet snowfalls up in Alaska and the Yukon, and Dall sheep are starving, and in some mountain ranges we've lost 40 to 50 to 60% of the population. How do we bring them back? We're always looking for, okay, how can we raise the most money to do it? How can we put that money on the mountain? How are we going to fund, disease research? So we see it, we do it. Wild Sheep Foundation's directed since, that first governor's tag, Ed Hirschler's Wyoming governor's tag that sold for $23,000 in 1980. We have put about $89 million back into agencies for wild sheep conservation just on the sale of conservation permits. So it's very, very effective.
Yeah.
What I think we should be, instead of us arguing on that guy or gal gets a privilege that I don't, I would like us to do a better job of making sure that the dollars that are directed to the agencies are going where they should. And Steve, I think you asked that question early on and we didn't touch on it because there's some agencies that do an exceptionally good job and are very transparent of where that money goes. And there's some that aren't so. Wyoming has the Wyoming Governor's Big Game License Coalition. So all the 5 sheep tags, any of the elk tags, any of the moose tags go into this pool, but they're separated out by species. And then stakeholders, Wyoming Wild Sheep Foundation has a seat on that. Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation has a seat on that. Mule Deer Foundation has a seat on that coalition. The pronghorn guys, all the little critter groups have a seat. They then evaluate projects that are brought before the Big Game License Coalition to say, hey, we want to fund a sagebrush habitat project that's going to benefit mule deer, certainly sage hens, maybe less so on bighorn sheep. Well, sometimes those stakeholder groups will go, we got plenty of money on the bighorn sheep pool. Let's pull a little bit out, and collectively we agree we're going to fund mule deer conservation.
Okay.
British Columbia does the same thing with their Habitat Conservation Trust. The monies that we raise for the BC ministry go into this pool. There are a group of stakeholders. Wild Sheep Foundation has a seat, but we have a representative that's from BC, and they make decisions on where those monies are spent.
Oh, that's transparent.
Very transparent. Nevada, another one that does it really, really well. Some of them not so well. And with all the challenges and
can you give an example of a bad one, or is that not
probably not a good thing for me to say because we partner with all
you
of
might
them.
get froze out.
So let me just talk about the good ones. But there's some that could do better. And
we could do omission.
We could bleep it maybe. But the fact of the matter is, again, I can show your Wild Sheep Foundation spends our dollars. I mean, we do these conservation impact summaries. We're absolutely transparent. Agencies not so. So that's something that I think we as NGOs, whether it's Wild Sheep Foundation, whether it's Mule Deer, whether it's elk, whether it's any of the organizations that are selling these conservation permits and driving the money back to the agency, we need to do a better job of holding our agencies accountable. Going, okay, where is the money?
Mm-hmm.
Where is it going? And is it going to the resource that it should?
I think that's important. Like something you said that there's not enough sheep to pay for themselves. Like
Right.
I think a lot of people don't think about it that way.
Right.
But it makes total sense. Like, and like a state like Montana or Colorado, you talk about elk, like those things pay for themselves and more, right?
Brody, I wrote a paper back in the 80s before I was in the nonprofit, and I was, it was kind of the economics of hunting. And at the time, and I don't know what it is now, but at the time I was looking at Colorado. I lived in California. I'd drive out to Colorado to hunt elk. And at the time, I think non-resident Colorado elk tags funded like 80% of Colorado Fish and Game back then. Now it's Colorado Parks and Wildlife. But, elk paid the way. And as we all know, the non-resident tags, pay the way primarily. Montana, what was it? $69,000. $69,000 comes from resident bighorn sheep, 122 from non-resident. So
for a much smaller amount of tags.
Yeah, almost double. I mean, it's we pay $125 for a sheep tag. We can buy an unlimited. So we can have that tag in our pocket. But if you draw one of the limiteds, it's $125. It's $1,750 for a non-res. So that gets back to this social thing. And Steve, I love it when you talk about it because look at what's happened to our country. We've become so polarized. We identify with pretty asinine things. Mm-hmm. We allow the media to fester that polarization. Even within our own community, we identify by what rifle we use and we criticize others that don't. We identify what fricking camo we use, and we create communities that if you're not a part of it and you don't wear my camo, you're a bad guy. Yeah. Boots, whatever.
We're so basic.
And it's like,
I'm not hanging out with no 300 Win Mag guy.
Good God.
But do we have like a name for the guys who have 6'5" Creedmoors?
Oh, yeah. The 6'5" need more. Yeah, and it's a great caliber. But I mean, it's, we've taken the around the campfire arguing on whether the 30-06 is better than the 270 to this level that's just freaking asinine now. Yeah. And so, we fostered, and now we're doing, we do the same thing on the funding. And I guess, I would just hope that we could change the narrative, and start, let's deal with facts. Okay, the facts are, auction tags bring in more money than raffle tags at a far more efficient way for Wild Sheep Foundation is going to raffle off an Arizona bighorn sheep tag. We get $0 for doing it, but we're going to do it. We're going to pay all that money to do it. We're going to raise $125,000-$150,000 directed to Arizona Game and Fish. Well, we held an auction now, that's expensive for us, but we're 4 nights of auction, and we raised $500,000. So we know that it's the most cost-effective is an auction tag. but we still get caught up in this social narrative. So what I want to really dive into, and that is that how do we get beyond it? How do we get beyond criticizing that guy because he wears camo, or we don't like his brand, or that gal because she's shooting a 6.5 Creedmoor and we don't like that caliber, to why don't we just focus again on that ram, lamb, or ewe on a ridgeline and go, what's best for wildlife?
Well, here's a
I
way
have a
maybe you
question.
could get at it if you can answer. I don't know if you could answer this question or not, but what would the bighorn sheep landscape in North America look like without this money?
Nailed it. Mic drop.
Can I?
Mic drop.
Like,
We wouldn't have them.
right.
83% of agency funding right now in the U.S. comes from these. What happens when 83 comes from an auction tag or raffle tag? Most of that. What happens when 83% of that funding goes away? Where's it going to come from?
Question.
Yes,
Do we
ma'am.
have over time, let's say the past 10 years, from states that have sheep, the amount of money, let's say collectively across these states from licenses, both in state and out of state, and if that has gone up over the past 10 years or gone down as a sign of general hunter commitment to conservation of sheep?
Absolutely. On now, are you saying total? Because we all know that revenue is generally going down
Okay.
because generally hunting numbers are going
Right.
down. Yes, we
Part-
saw
yeah.
during the pandemic a bump up. Yes, we see the largest percentage of new hunters are women. Is that a significant percentage of the current? You might be able to argue
Yeah, there
it,
are a
but
bunch
it's
of
it's
factors.
significant. But here's the sad fact, and this gets back to impact. I can show you a nice linear upward trend on dollars going into wild sheep conservation.
Collectively
Collectively.
across. Okay.
Collectively.
Okay. But the percentage of that is
Oh, auction tax?
right.
10% increase over the last 10 years. It was 73%
Okay.
in 2014, 83% in the U.S. So a 10% increase in auction tag revenues going to the agency.
And then and licenses.
Licenses not so, and that that you could get U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service data, and again there's been slight increases, and then it kind of plateaus and then drops. My concern is there's a linear growth in revenue going to wild sheep conservation. Sadly, over the last, say, 5 years or so, because of huge die-offs in Alaska and the Yukon, some die-offs during disease, from in Texas. I mean, Texas had 1,800 desert bighorn sheep 5-6 years ago. Little over 500 now.
Wow.
All
Damn.
because of disease from aoudad.
Ooh.
There's 40,000 plus aoudad in the state, free ranging. I'm not even talking about behind wire. And we've gone from 1,800 desert bighorns to less than 600. That scares the shit out of me. And so, the point there is, it gets back to impact and what are we doing with it, and are we holding the agencies accountable? We can drive this money to them. Are we getting the bang for our buck? And that's for all of us to work on to ensure that we are. And money isn't everything. I mean, it's certainly a driver, but we have to make sure that we're doing as much as we possibly can effectively with that money if we know what to do. How are we going to deal with snow load in March, April in Alaska? I don't know. That I don't know. I mean, it gets back to even some crazy ideas. We grow desert bighorn sheep. We've done it in Texas. We've done it in Arizona.
I mean, just by putting water.
But we actually intensively managed them in Texas to bring them from 0 to 1,800 to 2,000. We did the same thing in Arizona.
Oh, you mean like with release, with using release sites and stuff?
Captive bred and release.
Yeah, I got you.
Done in Mexico.
Like literally growing them.
We're growing them.
To reintroduce them.
Sonora is about 15,000 desert bighorn sheep in the state of Sonora alone. 50% of them are behind wire. We have an initiative to say, hey, look, let's use market forces to incentivize you to release them, and not a put and take scenario, but release them and create free-ranging desert bighorn sheep in suitable habitat. And we've got great examples of people doing it. They're doing the same thing in Coahuila. They're doing it in Sierra Leone. They're doing it in Chihuahua. So we can do it with desert bighorn sheep with some caveats. There's some challenges to it. This isn't raising whitetails in Michigan, but it can be done. Is that something that we could do in the northern climes? I don't know, but you have a 40 to 50% drop in Dall sheep. You got probably a 10 to 15 to 20% drop in stone sheep populations for a whole variety of reasons. It's not over harvest. It's more environmental factors or disease. What are we going to do? I'll tell you what we need.
Man,
we need the money to do it.
This is a whole other episode.
Yeah,
but I think that
no doubt.
if someone came in and proposed in Alaska doing like captive breeding,
they'd be shot
to juice Dall sheep numbers, I think that would be like you'd have a bigger controvery on your hands than conservation tags. And your question was like, how do you find peace with it? There's a thing in rhetoric that there's an observation of mine when it comes to debate and rhetoric that I've pointed out a handful of times around conversations having to do with the impacts of a border wall. Okay, between U.S. and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And when there's talk of building an impenetrable barrier between the U.S. and Mexico to try to get a grip on illegal immigration, there's this thing you bring up that one would bring up. You'd say that would be detrimental. That would be detrimental to wildlife movements.
You bet.
So jaguars, desert bighorns.
Right.
Okay, that's a thing to consider. Now, someone can bring up, hey, let's consider this. And people that are like vehemently supportive of a wall would be angry that you brought it up, right? They'd be like, well, you haven't lost your job, okay, to an illegal immigrant. So they're angry that you're laying out all the facts for consideration. But in your own family, if you're proposing like, hey, should we go on vacation this spring? In that conversation, someone can say, well, you realize if we go on vacation this spring, that's going to mean that we are going to forego painting our house because it costs money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the person that brings that up isn't attacked. It's like you're all airing the pros and cons, right? And then you come to an agreement. All the pros and cons considered, we come to an agreement. Even though it's going to be detrimental to wildlife movement, it is net positive to make an impenetrable barrier between the U.S. and Mexico, let's say. Or even though we'll forego painting our house, we're determining it's a net positive that we go on a family vacation. I think ultimately the answer might be arrived at similarly around auction permits. It'd be like, it's imperfect. It's imperfect. One could argue that by auctioning off a tag, we're hypothetically removing a sheep from the pool. That's not perfect. The individual might use some hunting methods that aren't available to everybody else. That's imperfect, but net, all things weighed in, the money is worth it. Like, that's probably the best you're going to do. Like, I don't think you're going to get it to where some guy reads online that someone bought a tag for $1.3 million. I don't think you're going to get it where 100% of the hunters are. You're never going to get there.
Right.
It's going to be that, like, the general sentiment is, hate them rich guys, but that's a shitload of money for bighorns.
Yeah.
And in the long run, it's probably going to mean more tags.
Right. There's one more net positive impact, and Steve, you're right. You're absolutely spot on. There is another little thing that we have in this country that's not in others, which is the Pittman-Robertson Act, and these tag purchases are non-federal dollars, so they're subject and eligible for a 3-to-1 match with PNR Act. So, we can draw, we can send 1.3 million. We're gonna get 10% of this, so 130. 1.3 minus $130,000. We send that to New Mexico Game and Fish. They can apply for a 3-to-1 match from PNR Act dollars for wildlife restoration, and turn that into a $5 million bump. So, yeah, it is imperfect. It works, and I guess until we find something that works better, well, why don't we live with what does work? And it has worked really, really well from 1980, and the dollars are there, and argue over what caliber's better or what camo you wear. That's a little bit more, productive.
I think one of the final points we had arrived at when we had this conversation was a sense of, sort of a sense of hope or a call to action that people would open their checkbooks up, open their credit card balances up to support raffle tags, and that you would arrive at a point where these raffle tags were netting equal to or more than auction tags. And I think you kind of touched on this early, but if we, you don't think we're there.
Not yet, but we during this seminar, there was a guy adamant on, are you working on it? Well, yeah, we are. We looked at our raffles that we do at the convention, and we were selling $40 tickets.
Okay.
We could not physically sell enough tickets in 3 days of expo to cover the costs and really make a profit, if you will, which our profit goes right back into sheep conservation on doing it that way. So we played the capitalists again. We go, okay, well, we're going to sell these not for $40. We're going to sell 1,000 tickets at $200. And then for the stone sheep, we're going to sell 500 tickets at $500. Is that too much? I think we figured out that it was, but we increased our raffle take. So what I pointed out in this seminar
that helped the raffle take
big time. That
so
helped
$5 a pop isn't it doesn't work. You can't process it.
You can't process enough, and $40 for us. We couldn't sell enough physically in 3 days to make it really profitable. What you want to do is you want to keystone it. You want to double your money on each one of these things. Mm-hmm. Well, very, very rare these days for anyone to donate. There's a few, but donate a sheep hunt. You've got stone sheep hunts now selling for $100,000. Bighorn sheep hunts selling for $110,000. Doll sheep used to be.
You're talking about outfitted hunts.
Yeah. $45,000. So, on a doll sheep hunt, we need to sell at least $100,000 worth of tickets to double our money. A stone sheep, if we're buying it at face value, we got to sell $200,000. So, we went to a different way. As I said in our seminar, if we can figure out a way to do it, again, let's be intellectually honest. If our goal is to raise the most money, if we can find a way to raise the most money with a raffle, we'll do it. Because the objective is to raise the most money for the resource and for the habitat.
Can you humor this question for a minute?
Yeah.
The one that just went for 1.3 million.
Right.
Walk me through what would have happened. Walk me through if you'd done a raffle. In your mind, the best way to do a raffle from your learnings, what would that sheep tag have generated?
Well, that was a bighorn. So we sold a bighorn in Alberta. We bought the tag for $80,000. It's a hunt. It's not a tag. I mean, we actually bought an outfitted hunt for $80,000, and our objective was to sell $200,000 worth of tickets and net 120.
Okay.
So, if we pay the outfitter 80, we net 120. Theoretically, we could direct $120,000 into bighorn sheep conservation. We're going to direct $1.3 million.
But what if you take? But just take. I mean, I know you're trying.
I can't figure out how to get 1.3 million out of a raffle.
But
unless it's a
take a
nationwide
stab.
lotto.
But take a stab that not the hunt, not the guided hunt, but take a stab that had there been a raffle, just in the best because you're probably more qualified to answer this imperfect question than anybody else on the planet. Had that been a raffle, that tag, that New Mexico tag, had that been a raffle, what would it have brought in?
$250,000.
You think so?
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah.
Darn.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you've done a bunch of raffles.
We do a lot of raffles, but we could probably 250. Maybe if you if you could get people, hey, this is the biggest sheep in North America. This is what it's going to be. How long are you going to run the raffle? My hip pocket is 250, 300,000. Could we get $500,000? Maybe.
That becomes a little obscure, though. That
but how many
notifying raffle buyers about this sheep?
Win a chance! It's the biggest
sheep in the world. Yeah, and so
I can see you getting a real call from the Washington Gambling Commission at that point.
And by the way, Washington residents, Hawaii residents. If we were going to draw, this is a funny one in Nevada. If we were going to draw the hunt in Nevada residents aren't eligible to do it online. They have to buy it there. So, the laws are, Pennsylvania's got crazy laws. Everyone's got interesting laws. We run our raffles, when we do a raffle, we run it out of Wyoming. We have an office in Wyoming. We run our raffles out of Wyoming because it's a little bit more generous on the, our little liberal, I guess you could say, on the raffle laws. But we have run afoul on Washington and got called out on it. We've run afoul even in Montana, where one of my employees was trying to do the right thing, she thought, shoot, I'll just, if you want me to run your card right now, I'll just run it right now. She didn't know it was a credit card, not a debit card. I then got a phone call saying, hey, one of your employees, I'm with the Montana Department of Revenue, one of your employees just did an illegal raffle purchase for me. And I went,
Yeah.
Do the right thing, get burned. But, those are the things we're up against. But there we go.
Yeah. It was good talking to you about this, man.
Yeah, this was, I appreciate it. I'm honored to be on the program. I really appreciate, listening, looking at the facts. What we have to really look at is the why. Why is it deep down inside we're envious of something that somebody else can buy that we can't, and that's really what the nut cutting comes down to. It's just this. That's human nature. So all we can do is provide the facts, do our best, focus on the resource, and be open to ideas. Come up with a better idea of how to fund it. We're all ears.
Yeah, no, I could see that. If some mathematician came to you and said, Gray, that tag should have brought $3 million by my formula, you'd take the call. Yeah.
I'd take the call. I would.
All right, well, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Thank you very much.
I
appreciate y'all.
Yeah, thank you. People can buy a raffle ticket perhaps next year.
You bet.
In Reno,
you can buy. We have raffles that we're offering online all the time. So are our chapters. We try to obey obviously all the laws, but if you look at sheep hunting right now and how expensive it is, raffles are the best deal going.
Yeah.
From a numbers standpoint, from an odds standpoint. So get in all the raffles you possibly can. And then also treat it like a portfolio. Put some money away every month to buy that sheep hunt someday.
I forgot to mention, you're the CEO of Wild Sheep Foundation.
Yes,
Did I mention
sir.
that? Okay.
Yeah.
And then tell people real quick if they want to get checked out on wild sheep, what's the best approach?
Yeah, come. We're based here in Bozeman, world headquarters, but go to wildsheepfoundation.org, wildsheepfoundation.org, and you can see what we do. Last year, we directed $11.1 million to programs benefiting wild sheep. pretty impressive for an organization with only 11,000 members. So
Is that right?
yeah, I like to say that, we may have a relatively small footprint, but we cast one hell of a long conservation shadow, and we're proud of it.
All right, great, man. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. Appreciate it.